Hey everyone, welcome to the Minnesota Twins, our 2023 American League Central Champions edition of Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. I'm your host, CJ Baumgartner, and I apologize for not doing a podcast earlier in the week. I just had a bunch of other things that just got in the way, and I wasn't able to sit down and do a podcast, and I didn't feel like I could sit down and give it the time it deserved. And once the Twins got within a couple games of clinching the American League Central, I was like, well, I think we're just going to have to wait until they actually clinch the darn thing. And I would have hopped on and did this stream sooner, but I had to do some play-by-play tonight. By the time I finally got home, got myself situated, I'm ready to get down. Let's celebrate and let's do this thing here with this live stream. Normally, I don't do a podcast as a quote unquote live stream, not necessarily live. It's more of like I do it and then immediately post it and it goes uploaded. But hey, drop your comments down, drop some likes, drop whatever. We're all vibing in this together. The Minnesota Twins are the 2023 American League Central champions. Let's party. Now, to get to this situation, the Twins had their magic number down to numbers as we went through the week. The Twins won 2 games out of 3 in Cincinnati in a series where, the first night didn't necessarily go their way. And then they got the timely hitting that they needed in the next 2 games and were able to muscle past a team in Cincinnati that is fighting for their playoff lives. The Twins, I thought, pitched pretty well for having to be in the bandbox of a stadium that is Great American Ballpark. And the Minnesota Twins were able to get through, got their magic number to 1. And thank goodness we all got behind Cleveland and Detroit and they pushed through on their rallies. And it allowed the Minnesota Twins to get into a position where they had to clinch the division themselves. And I know it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but isn't it just feel so much better that the Twins had the opportunity to clinch the division in front of their home fans? That the Twins really in all this were able to do it in front of the home fans. We're able to do it getting a win. We're able to kind of put that stamp on. And an interesting fact, I was driving home from the football game I was just calling, and I was listening to the Twins radio post-game show, and there was a point that was brought up, and it said this is the first time that the Minnesota Twins clinched a division with a win on their home field since 2009. So the first time in the Target Field era that the Twins were able to clinch the division by winning a game on their home field. And that's awesome. And really in the whole thing of the Twins clinching divisions and clinching playoff spots, when you remember the 2009 Twins, obviously it was game 163. It was the last win that we would see at the Metrodome. There was a whole bunch of emotions flying with that one. And then you go forward to 2010, the Twins, they celebrated at Target Field, but the Twins lost the game. And then they had to wait for Chicago, or I think they won and Chicago had to lose. So the magic number went to 1, and then they had to wait for Chicago to lose for it to officially get to 0. I think that's how the math technically worked out on that. The Twins this year, it's like the magic number was at 1, they won the ball game, and then boom, it was done. And it's just so much better this way. It's so much better because in 2017, I believe they got it with a win, but they also had to wait for the Angels to lose in 2017. And they were in Cleveland when they clinched and they celebrated, and it was awesome. And I can't tell you how fun it was watching the Twins celebrate in 2017 for the 100 losses the year before to getting to the point where they were going to sneak in as a wild card team. I was in college. I was a sophomore in college, and I hadn't seen my favorite baseball team make the playoffs since I was a 7th grader. So it was a really fun moment to just get to stay up late and watch that game. I remember like everything I was doing that day. And then when they clinched in 2019, I mean, they ran away with that one. It was more fun watching them beat up on Cleveland, but they eventually did clinch the division. I believe it was on the road. I don't even remember where it was actually. And then in 2020, the Twins came back at the last second in the very last weekend of the season and had the White Sox choke away the division in 2020, which is how we got to this point. But even clinching the division in 2020 didn't really mean much. There wasn't, I mean, I hope I'm not Mandela affecting myself, but I believe that there really wasn't anything due to COVID, obviously. And they weren't able to do like a full-on celebration, full-on party like they're doing now. And I've seen, whether it's beat reporters, whether it's non-baseball fans talk about the quote unquote ridiculousness of celebrating the way that the Minnesota Twins or any Major League Baseball team celebrates after clinching a playoff spot. Like, it's a full on party. Go onto social media and see the clips that Bally or see the clips that the Twins or whoever are posting of the clubhouse vibes. It's immaculate right now. It's awesome. It's fun. And everybody goes, well, you're celebrating for just getting in. I thought you should celebrate for winning the whole dang thing. Baseball is, and it's a little less true now with the expanded playoffs, but back in the day, there were only 4 teams in each league. So out of 30 teams, only 8 teams actually got into the postseason. It was incredibly hard. It's a 162 game grind. And to be one of those 8 teams left standing, it's hard. So yeah, I think they can celebrate a little bit. It's a little bit different than football. It's a little bit different than basketball or hockey or MLS or whatever, but they deserve this. It's fun. Sports are fun. Party it up. There was a really good quote actually from Thad Levine, the Twins general manager, and he was talking during again, the Twins radio was covering. He was talking to Chris Atterbury, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but the general vibe was, I always say, act like you've never been here before, because you never know when you're going to get here or if you're ever going to get here again. And that's the vibe I'm rolling with here. I know that the Twins have the 18 game losing streak in the postseason. I know they haven't won a postseason game since I was in the first grade. They haven't won a series in the playoffs since before I was even in kindergarten. Like, that's how far back we're going. But at the end of the day, watching the flashbacks of like Mauer and Morneau celebrating division championships, watching all that happen, it's fun. Baseball is fun. This is a game, and they get the opportunity to go to the playoffs. My favorite baseball team is going to be in the playoffs again. I don't care how many wins that they end up getting. They could not win a game the rest of the regular season, and I don't care. There's going to be postseason baseball in Twins territory, and that's the fun part. So I think we don't necessarily need to be so snooty about this stuff. I know that they're professionals. I know all that stuff, but who cares, man? This is a kid's game. And it's just really fun. So the Minnesota Twins get the win over the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, 8-6. They punch their ticket to the postseason. And why don't we spend some time talking a little bit about what necessarily this postseason series is going to potentially be, because that AL West is an absolute dogfight right now. And we'll give you an updated look on the standings here. But first, I'm just going to celebrate myself here. We're on the live stream. I just got home. I put my stuff away. My wife is in bed like 2 rooms over, so I'm trying not to be too rambunctious here. My wife's in bed. She's got to get up like early in the morning to work like a 24-hour shift in an emergency room. And I'm here late at night celebrating a Minnesota Twins win because they are back into the postseason. So I got whatever's hit my mic there. I got whatever's left of this growler of brewery beer that I had in this big old Twins souvenir cup that who knows how long I got from Target Field. But hey, we're enjoying this one here. The Minnesota Twins are playoff bound. They're going back to the postseason, and here we go. This is going to be awesome. So again, leave some comments down in the chats of wherever you are at, and let's celebrate this whole thing together. So with the Twins clinching, let's take a look at some of the certain positions that the Minnesota Twins could be in as we look at the standings in the American League. So the Twins have clinched the division that officially eliminates Detroit, officially eliminates Cleveland. And now as we go into the standings, the only teams that are alive are the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Mariners, Astros, Blue Jays, and the Rays have clinched a playoff spot. The Orioles have clinched a playoff spot. The Twins have clinched a playoff spot. Looking into the standings right now, the Yankees technically aren't out of it yet. Neither are the Red Sox, but they're going to be gone any day now. And by the way, the Red Sox 76-78. They have a losing record. So for all those people who said, no, the worst team in the AL East is going to be the best team in the AL Central. Nope, not this year. Not this year, bud. The Twins right now 82-72 with 8 games remaining against all teams with losing records. The best they could get is 90 wins, which isn't necessarily a juggernaut, but the Twins got their ticket punched. That's really all that matters. So if the season ended today, right now, the Minnesota Twins would host the Houston Astros in a playoff series. That would be what would happen if the season ended today. The Twins would host the Astros in a best 2 out of 3 series, all 3 games at Target Field, to be a rematch in 2020 from that series, except I hope Carlos Correa hits a go-ahead home run in game 2 for the Twins and not for the Astros like he did last time. But the Twins would host the Astros. The Blue Jays would go to Tampa Bay to play the Rays in the best 2 out of 3. And the Baltimore Orioles would have the 1 seed. The Texas Rangers would have the 2 seed. And I know there's been a lot of talk about what the Twins could do if the Twins could potentially get the 2 seed. It is still mathematically in play for the Twins to get the 2 seed, which, remember, getting the 1 or 2 seeds in the baseball playoffs now gives you a first round bye out of the new wild card series. That's a new playoff format since last year. And I like it. It's a fun playoff format. Makes not just winning your division important, but still playing hard through the rest of the season, as we see right now with Baltimore and Tampa Bay. But really, with the Twins, there's still a very minute chance. I think if you look at FanGraphs, it's like 0.3% or 3% or something along those lines. It's very minimal that the Twins would do that. And part of the reason why is because the Twins would basically have to win out or be pretty darn close. Right now, they're 3 games back of that final wild card spot. And it's still possible theoretically, but the thing is that the Rangers, Mariners, and Astros are all separated by like a half a game. So there's still a lot of dominoes that need to fall, and the Rangers, Mariners, and Astros are going to see a lot of each other over the last 8 games of the season, 8 to 9 games, however these teams have left. They're going to play each other a lot, which means it's going to be a lot of back and forth typically. So again, everything would have to fall right for the Twins, and I just don't, realistically don't see that happening. The 3 seed is pretty much going to be in play. And I know I got a couple listeners on the podcast who have been messaging me precipitously about getting the 2 seed. And I've messaged them back saying, I really want to get that 2 seed. And look, the fan in me doesn't care. We coming for that 2 seed. But also, as the tempered podcast host I try to be, it's probably not going to end up quite that way for the Twins. They're likely going to get that 3 seed, and they'll play the worst wild card team in the first round. But that first round bye would be useful in terms of getting rest for guys like Carlos Correa, who, since we last spoke, got put on the injured list. Now, Carlos Correa has plantar fasciitis that's been reported on, extensively throughout the season. Carlos Correa said he was feeling good, and then all of a sudden there's just a pop. And as bad as that sounds, it actually isn't too terrible. The MRIs came back clean from what I've seen on Twitter, and it sounds like it's actually a good thing. Again, I'm my wife works in medicine. You think I could just ask her what's going on, but no, I'm gonna do my own research on Twitter here, and based off of what people close to the Twins or people who have been following the Twins, like beat writers and things like that, it's actually kind of a silver lining, a blessing in disguise a little bit, that Carlos Correa had that pop in his ankle, because with plantar fasciitis, apparently that pop, basically whatever pressure, whatever stress was in that part popped, and now it can start to heal. And will it, become fully healed by the time the playoffs start? No, obviously not. But the hope is that, okay, well, cool. Now that's done. And whenever the season ends, he'll rest. And then next year, this might not be an issue. Because remember, plantar fasciitis is something that can linger for years. And if you're Rocco Baldelli, it could be something where, Rocco Baldelli's career, he told the Twins media, yeah, I had plantar fasciitis 1 year, really sucked. And then the next year it was just gone, and it never came back again. So something like that could theoretically happen with Carlos Correa. But Carlos Correa basically said, I don't know if this is an actual quote or not, but I think he said it to Dick Bramer, like, you're going to have to saw my leg off to prevent me from playing in the postseason. So Carlos Correa, unless something goes horribly wrong, the point of putting him on the IL was like, okay, we got the division locked up, man. He's going to come back for the Colorado series. So I think it's basically like, this is the furthest out date we could push for you to come to be on the IL, to allow you to still come back. Because remember, at this point in the season, anybody that goes on the injured list is not going to be able to play in that first round. it's a quick 3-game first round series. It's 3 days in a row. It's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And you might not even need that Thursday game. And then the division series is like 2 days later. Like it is bang, bang, bang rolling into these series once the postseason starts. So it's not basketball playoffs where it takes like a whole month. Like baseball playoffs are like 3 weeks. It's in and out. NBA playoffs take like 2 months, really, from like mid-April to mid-June when it's all said and done. But I digress. The point is that Carlos Correa is on the IL. And again, the Twins in the injured list and injuries haven't always been the best formula or haven't always gone according to plan in terms of rehabbing and getting better. So, take it with a grain of salt, but I'm not too worried about Carlos Correa going on the IL. We'll see what happens. And we've gotten a decent amount of September Correa. It's time for us to get that October Correa. We unlocked the October Correa DLC package. Let's go. Another guy going on the IL was Royce Lewis. He officially went on the IL. Jordan Luplow, who the Twins originally designated for assignment, which means he was going to be taken off the 40-man roster. Now with Royce Lewis going on the IL, they found some weird rule. They were calling the league office. They found some loophole where instead of designating him for assignment, they actually just demoted him, which means they never took him off the 40-man, which means whatever. All it is to say is that everything works out with the 40-man because Royce Lewis then on the IL is taken off the 40-man part for the time being, and then Luplow comes back in. Luplow had a strikeout, I think, in one pinch hit appearance today, but either way, that's how the Twins worked out with that. But Royce Lewis had a grade 1 hamstring injury. I don't know the official term, if it's a tear, I think it's a strain, grade 1 hamstring strain, which is the mildest type of strain you can have. Royce Lewis, and again, take it with a grain of salt because Royce Lewis always is like, yeah, I'll be back. I'll be this. I'll be that. I'll be ready. Royce Lewis is confident that he's going to come back. He said that on the radio after the Twins clinched the division in the clubhouse. They had the post-game celebration. They talked with Royce Lewis, and he made it sound like he was going to come back and he was going to be ready to go for the playoffs. Again, take it with a grain of salt a little bit. It's the Twins. It's the injuries. Things can always change. But Royce Lewis going on the IL, probably retroactive to Wednesday, means that he's going to miss the rest of the regular season. But the hope is that, hey, he'll be back on the playoff roster. We can move, we'll roll, and we'll have everything ready to go when that moment comes. And as it's been pointed out by other people on Twitter, but I agree with the sentiment, is that Royce Lewis hasn't necessarily needed a ton of time to adjust to anything and to adjust to big league moments. This is a kid who made his big league debut a year ago, coming off an ACL tear, not really having a ton of baseball experience prior to 2020. And even that season wasn't particularly great. No 2020 minor league season. 2021, he tears his ACL. 2022, he comes back and looks like he's been a minor league stud for the last 3 years, and then tears his ACL again, and then immediately comes back this year and is a spark plug for the Twins. And then he misses time with the oblique strain, and then he comes back and is immediately a spark plug for the Twins. So I'm not necessarily worried about Royce Lewis, but again, take it with a grain of salt. Try not to get too ahead of myself, but I'm confident that we're going to have Correa and Lewis back in the lineup by the playoffs. I'm basing that off of nothing but good vibes, and the good vibes are rolling. Minnesota Twins clinching the American League Central for the first time since 2020. And that's kind of the injury update. The other thing, I guess, if we want to talk about injuries or maybe rehab, is Brock Stewart is throwing. He's got one more minor league assignment appearance on his rehab. I believe that was tonight, either that or it's Saturday. I think it's just more of like trying to slowly get him back into the fold, and the Twins don't want to maybe push him into big league action too early. But I think now that the Twins have locked up the Central, you can necessarily throw him in any situation because it doesn't matter how many games you lose or whatever the rest of the year. You can throw him into high leverage spots and just kind of see how he does in the big league level. But, I get the point of resting him and trying to build up his arm and his confidence and whatever. But I think the math changes a little bit now that the Twins have officially clinched. He's been throwing up to 98 again. 99, I think, was on the gun. So if he comes back, that changes a lot of things. Remember, Brock Stewart was the Twins' best reliever outside of Yohan Duran for the first half of the season before he got hurt. So for Brock Stewart to come back, again, he probably won't pitch as frequently, but if you only get one appearance out of Brock Stewart in the wild card series, and it's a seventh inning when the Twins are up by a run, and you just need him to come in and have a shutdown inning, and he gets you that, and he can instead knock Griffin Jax down a peg in the bullpen hierarchy, and it's 7-8-9 with Brock Stewart, Emilio Pagan, Yohan Duran, boom. And maybe in the fifth, sixth inning, you have Louis Varland come in and pitch you an inning. You could have Chris Paddock, who's been throwing a few innings in St. Paul, kind of 3-inning stretches here, trying to work his arm back up. Again, somebody who's going to have to come into the fold slowly, like Brock Stewart. But again, if you only can get one appearance out of him for the wild card series, but it's successful and it sets up everybody else in the bullpen, I mean, you'll take it if you're the Twins. This is the postseason. Any incremental chance you have of winning a ball game compared to not, you're going to take it. It's not the time to roll the dice on an unproven player. It's not the time to roll the dice on Cody Stashak in Yankee Stadium. You know what I'm saying? And the Twins have much better personnel than that team. They threw Cody Stashak out there just out of pure necessity in 2019. They threw Randy Dobnak out there because of pure necessity in 2019. But now the Twins have the pitching depth to be able to do some of this stuff. And it's awesome. It is great. And I think that, again, how much will Paddock and Brock Stewart help? I don't necessarily know. I can't guarantee they're going to come in and be lights out because they haven't faced major league pitching in Paddock's case since April of 2022. And in Brock Stewart's case, since late July or late June, excuse me. So there's still some question marks. They're not necessarily guaranteed to come in and be shutdown relievers, but what they do is they give you one more reliable person to put in the bullpen mix and one more person to adjust the hierarchy, to push maybe Griffin Jax down a peg, to maybe push Josh Winder, Cole Sands off of the list entirely. I know Jorge Alcala is also on that list of pitchers in AAA who the Twins theoretically are hoping to bring back. I don't know how much I'm a big Jorge Alcala guy. If you go back to the podcast previewing the season, I really had high hopes for Jorge Alcala that he would take a next step. I'm not necessarily seeing it. I don't necessarily want to rely on Jorge Alcala. Again, we talk about this isn't the time to necessarily go with some of those guys who, you have a good feeling in, but there's not really a lot to back it up. That's Jorge Alcala. That's not the time to be developing those guys. You need to basically be throwing every one of your best punches at whoever you're going to play in the postseason. So again, it's been a crazy ride. The Minnesota Twins have clinched their ticket into the 2023 postseason. They're going to host a wild card series, and me and my wife have tentatively bought tickets for the series. I don't think we got them confirmed yet. We bought them off of StubHub, so fingers crossed that we are good to go. Going to be up in like the 230 section in the second deck of right field. We're hoping to be there for that first playoff game on the Tuesday, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to have some stuff planned for the podcast for that. Potentially, depending on how full it is, maybe we'll do a post-game podcast if the Twins win from my vehicle as we wait maybe for everything to clear out in that ball game. But we got some stuff planned for the podcast for that. Maybe we'll do a mailbag next week as we get ready for the playoffs. So again, be following Bombs Away on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the proper channels. Also, give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Give us that 5-star rating. Give us those likes, subscribes, all that fun stuff to help grow this page and help grow what we're doing here at Bombs Away. And again, we'll do a mailbag next week and we'll get some questions ready for you guys to send over sometime next week for that last podcast of the regular season. Minnesota Twins are in the playoffs, and the guy who closed it in was Yohan Duran. And there's just a couple things got to say right away. One, it doesn't matter how much the Twins were going to win that game by. You need to have Yohan Duran come in and close that game. Now, I know he was really shaky. He loaded the bases. He gave up a run. His control wasn't necessarily where it wanted to be. He wasn't sharp. Dan Gladden made a point. Again, I was listening to the radio, so all this stuff is fresh in my mind as I was getting here to record the podcast. How much of it do you prescribe to jitters of like This is like this was the biggest moment of Yohan Duran's career, trying to lock in a playoff spot. He had the big entrance. It was a packed ballpark at Target Field. If Target Field is that kind of atmosphere for game one of a playoff series, it's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to that, to going to that playoff game so much. I've seen some pretty fun games at Target Field, seen some pretty good atmospheres. But that's going to be awesome. Looking forward to that. But again, I think with Duran, there was a little bit of jitter. So he's been a little shaky. But also, Bally, what the heck are you doing? Show Yohan Duran's entrance. I'm not necessarily blaming one particular person. I don't know whose job that is. I don't think it's Bramer's job or Morneau's job, or I don't even know if it's the director, producer, higher up executive. I'm not sure who that falls on. So I'm not going to like call out any particular person because one, I don't even know who those people are. So whoever's in charge, whoever's decision that is to not show the Duran entrance because you need to get a couple more ads in on the company that's going bankrupt. No, show the Yohan Duran entrance. They're able to do it on other networks who are on the away team, and they're still able to find ways to show the Duran entrance. The fact that you couldn't, Bally, shows how fraudulent you are and shows how much of bums that company at the top is run. Now, again, I'm not calling anybody out like locally in Minneapolis, St. Paul for the Bally stuff. I know a lot of that's like corporate, conglomerate, multinational, whatever deal. So we'll blame the big wigs for that one. But anyway, Bally, you're frauds. I'm glad you're going bankrupt. As I've heard other people say before, burn it to the ground. Bally Sports, you will not be missed. Anyway, Yohan Duran at the entrance. It was awesome. I want that playoff game to now be a night game because one, it'll be really cold. So that's not maybe in my favor. And it's not going to help the Twins offensively because that ball's just not going to carry. And, you know, the Twins pitching will still be good. But like if the other team's pitching is going to be good, then it's a little shaky. Either way, I want it to be a night game because I want Duran to have to come out and do that again and be a part. I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of the Yohan Duran entrance. I got to see it in a day game when I went in April and it was cold and it was during the day. And like the vibe was good, but it wasn't like great. And mainly because it wasn't a well-attended game in April because it was still really cold at the time. They were playing the Royals. The Twins were beating up on them. But Duran came in the game and it was fun. It was fun to get to watch that. But either way, as we look at the Twins and as we look at Yohan Duran, really this bullpen is going to hinge not so much on Varland, not so much on Paddock, not so much on Brock Stewart, not so much on Emilio Pagan or Caleb Thielbar, Griffin Jacks, whatever guy you want to put in that mix. The bullpen rides or dies with Yohan Duran. And if I'm going to take a second here to pull up my latest article that I wrote for Zone Coverage, I talk a little bit about the fact that that Yohan Duran struggled in that late July, early August portion of the season. There was the big talk of, should Yohan Duran drop the curveball entirely? He's getting in his own head. Is Yohan Duran washed? Like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, things just turned around and everything bounced back, and Yohan Duran was back to normal. And the reason was overusage. And I think generally every fan came to that perspective of like the Twins just rode him probably a little bit too much in that stretch, but the Twins needed the wins. That was like just before they really, really started clicking. Twins started to play in some games where it's like, we really need Duran to close these down and win us some ball games. And so I'm just kind of going to skim through this article here that I wrote for Zone Coverage. You can go check it out at zonecoverage.com where I wrote it. You can also find it on my Twitter page or the Bombs Away Twitter page to find the link to that article as well. Duran in 2022 had a 1.86 ERA, a 33.5 strikeout percentage, a whip of under 1, and 57 appearances. And of course had a 1.5 FWAR, a 3.21 FIP, and a 4.56 win probability added mark last year. Twins ripped the Band-Aid off. They made him the full-time closer. And over the course of the season, he's had a 2.1 ERA. He's 13 now for 16 in saves over 31 appearances through the first half, I should say. So he was 12 of 15 in the first half of the season. But after the All-Star break, Duran's ERA had a 5.23 earned run average over his next 11 appearances. And that again is that time where he played in a lot of ball games. And again, it was before Emilio Pagan really kind of had that resurgence. Caleb Thielbar, of course, was always nice. Griffin Jax has been up and down. Jorge Lopez is out of the picture. Duran, again, he needed to be that guy. There was nobody that they could really turn to in that situation. Pagan was maybe just starting to heat up, but even still, Duran was the guy you want to put in that situation. Duran snapped back into shape since August 13th. And again, this will be a little bit adjusted because of his appearance yesterday today, and probably his appearance on Wednesday, where he had a shutout inning against Cincinnati. But Duran has had a 1.32 ERA in his last 13 appearances, while going 6 for 7. So I guess now 7 for 8 in save attempts. The underlying numbers have come back to Duran's career average as well. He has a 2.38 FIP, a 32.1% strikeout rate. And over that small sample size, he's already had a 0.27 win probability added. And to get Duran back into his top form was huge. And the Twins started to get hot in late July, early August, but they didn't really start to maintain that and get less streaky until they started. Like, the Twins would win 4 in a row, and then they would lose 2 in a row. They would lose 3 in a row. They'd win 4 in a row, lose 2 in a row. Like, they'd be so streaky. And then now over the last month, the Twins have really started to, at least, my memory isn't blanking on me, just started to consistently win series instead of being up and down. It wasn't going, the roller coaster wasn't going like this. It was like a steady incline with some drops every now and again. But it was a very steady rise, I should say, very calculated over the last month. The thing about Duran is people think, okay, well, the Twins were overusing him. Does that mean that was his velocity going down and therefore making him more hittable? No, actually. Velocity wasn't the root cause of Duran's issues. His 101.8 mile an hour average velocity on his fastball remained unchanged from his season average. Duran's strikeout to walk ratio actually got better during that stretch, which means he was around the strike zone more. The biggest issue with the overusage of Duran is that it just allowed hitters to see his stuff more. Like how batters gain an advantage over a pitcher the second time and third time through the order because they know what to expect. And the more that Duran threw, the more tape people had on him. And especially when they had to use Duran in back-to-back days, teams were like, oh, yeah, I just saw this guy. I'm going to tee off on him. And especially when the Twins schedule worked out, was they played Seattle, then they would play Detroit or something, and then they play Seattle right back again. It just naturally worked out to those fluky kind of series where Duran would see a team twice in a row, or against Baltimore or whatever, where he just see them, multiple times in a week to 2 week span. And that just allowed people to be able to time up Duran a little bit better, which again highlights the significance of his off-speed pitches and trying to develop those, but also how he can't just throw his fastball every single time, because hitters, I know Duran can throw at his best 104 miles an hour, which is insane. And if you would have told me, if you would have told 2010 me that the Twins are going to get a reliever who throws 104 miles an hour, I would have fainted. That's just not something that would have happened. But when Duran only throws 104 mile an hour fastballs again and again and again and again and again, it just allows hitters to be able to time it up, because it's again why speed and movement are the name of the game in pitching nowadays. It's why movement is just as, if not more important lately than throwing hard, because if the ball moves all over the place, it's hard for a hitter to be able to time it up. It's hard for a hitter to be able to square it up correctly. And I know Duran's fastball has a little bit of movement to it, but at the end of the day, if you throw it over the plate enough, the guys are going to swing and they're going to be able to hit at it. And all they got to do is swing earlier, choke up on the bat a little bit, make that decision earlier. And when you make contact with it, the ball goes a long way, because it's a physics question. The ball's thrown harder, so you swing harder, so that ball travels further. And that's essentially kind of the story of Duran in this situation. You can see it with the numbers. in his exit velocity. Duran's 89.5 mile-an-hour exit velocity ticked up to 92.1 off the bat. He owned a 7.4% opposing barrel rate, which again is hitting the ball with good exit velocity and launch angle for the season. But during that late early July, August stretch, it went up to a 10.7% clip. As a result, Duran started to give up more home runs because, again, as we talked about, if you swing out of your shoes and just pray you make contact with the baseball, and you do, because it's thrown so fast, it's going to travel far. And that's what we saw in that situation, to have Duran's home run rate go up as well. The Twins overused him. Again, as we talked about, they deployed him 10 times in a 20-day stretch. They also used him for 3 days in a row over that 20-day span. And again, it doesn't seem like much, but again, with somebody with the average fastball velocity of 101.8, the Twins don't want to allow opposing hitters to time him up by using him. You want that guy to come in and just throw so fast that the guys don't even know what hit him, and to have to rely on him so much, it's not ideal. And that lies the big question is, okay, cool. So Duran's back to form. He's ready to go for the postseason. But hey, CJ, you might ask yourself, if the Twins were going to win like the wild card series, couldn't there potentially be a situation where they have to use Duran all 3 days? To which I would say, yes, that very well could happen. Because again, remember who Rocco Baldelli's mentor was as a manager? Joe Maddon, who managed the Tampa Bay Rays and the Chicago Cubs in 2016. Remember the 2016 playoffs, the Cubs had Aroldis Chapman, and they used him for 15 2/3 innings in 10 of their 17 postseason games. Chapman was the best reliever in baseball at the time. And again, was a guy similar, not in 100%. It wasn't an apples to apples comparison, but in terms of like, this is a flamethrower. This is we want to bring this guy in and just lock down a game. Him and Duran would fit that archetype very well. The Cubs used him as a workhorse in late innings because that's really all they had. Like, Joe Maddon was going to, I remember watching at the time, and I'm not as analytically minded, and you don't need to be, to see this situation of like, holy cow, they're using this guy a lot. Like, he's throwing a lot of pitches for somebody who's not used to throwing a lot of pitches, and he's doing it in high leverage situations, facing guys a second time through the order in some cases. And it worked for Joe Maddon. They ended up winning a World Series. And again, Rocco Baldelli, a guy who played for Joe Maddon in Tampa Bay, and again, in Rocco Baldelli's early coaching career, spent a lot of time with Joe Maddon. It worked. They won the World Series that year. But again, when you look at the numbers, Chapman only allowed 3 base runners in his first 3 World Series appearances, allowed no runs, struck out 8 batters through 5 total innings. And each of those appearances had like one off day in between, which again isn't a lot, but it's a little bit better than when you think of later in the series, because in his 2 final appearances where he pitched on back-to-back days, and again, implying that he pitched also a decent amount before then, Chapman gave up 3 runs on 4 hits and only 3 strikeouts in 2 2/3 innings. 1 hit included a Rajai Davis home run, remember, in the 8th inning, that nearly won it for Cleveland. LOL, Cleveland fans talking about the Twins' 18-game postseason losing streak. Yeah, it's not good, but at least we've won a World Series since the Truman administration. I mean, what are we doing here? My U.S. history isn't that great in that time, Stan. Was FDR still president? He might have been. You haven't won a World Series since World War II. So, you don't get to talk until you won a World Series since Joseph Stalin has passed away. Like, can we like draw the line at that, Cleveland? Anyway, that's just my good opportunity to dig on Cleveland in that situation. The point is, the Twins are likely going to have to lean on Duran in ways that maybe they weren't as comfortable with during the postseason. But since Duran has that experience, will that make him better? Again, the jury's still out. We have no idea because, again, with the postseason, I'm not the first one to say this. I think Aaron Gleeman said it on him and Bonus's podcast, talking about the fact of that they've done studies on things like this, on like, is it better to rest your team? Is it better to come in with momentum? Does it matter how many wins you get? What's the correlation for a team to have success in the postseason? And the answer is there's really no correlation with anything. And even still, correlation doesn't always mean causation. The point is the playoffs are weird. You just have to get in and hope good things happen. Oakland hasn't had a lot of good playoff success in the last, basically in the same time the Twins have had the postseason losing streak. But at the end of the day, Billy Beane, the GM of the A's, and I'm not sure what official role he has now in Oakland, but would always say, it's not my job to get the team to win in the playoffs. It's my job to get the team into the playoffs. And whatever they do at that point is on them. And it's not necessarily passing the buck onto them directly, but it's a way of saying, like, look, man, like the playoffs are so unpredictable. My job is just to get them in and hope everything goes right. And that's exactly what the Twins are going to have to do. It's exactly what Duran is going to have to do. Will Rocco Baldelli like having to lean on Duran as much as he will have to? No, but he's going to have to. And I know that the Twins have Brock Stewart coming back and Chris Paddock and Louis Varland's been an option in the bullpen. That's great, but they're all unpredictable in those situations, especially with the two coming off injury. And Emilio Pagan, I've said, is Emilio Pagan good? Is he bad? I don't know anymore, but the Twins are kind of forced to ride with him. I don't know. It's an up and down ride with Emilio Pagan. You're going to get some great outings. You're going to get a couple clunkers thrown in there. Yoan Duran is the thing that everything in the bullpen revolves around. And the Twins are going to have to lean on him. And if he's not good, the Twins aren't going to be able to be successful at all in the postseason. But again, you just got to get in and see what happens. You have to use him in those situations because it's your best shot. And the bullpen revolves around Duran, and we're going to find out. We're going to find out if he can pitch in the playoffs in the next couple weeks here. But Twins again win the American League Central. Yoan Duran back to form. He got his rest. He's going to need some more rest because the Twins are going to need to lean on him a lot once the postseason starts. And we saw how that can potentially cause his ERA to dip and things get out of whack. And well, we'll just have to find out, I guess. He wasn't particularly sharp today, but again, as we talked about, maybe more nerves, whatever. Duran threw on maybe Wednesday, so he had a day off in between, but, bygones be bygones, huh? The Twins are in the postseason. They won the American League Central. Just trying to see if there's anything I missed as we talked about. We've talked about Correa. We've talked about Lewis. We talked about my thoughts on the Twins clinching. Everything's coming together. Maybe outside of a couple injuries, because if Lewis and Correa both are not, even if one of them is not ready to go, that's a huge blow to this team. But if both of them are not able to play in the wild card series, if they have to be left off of the roster for the series entirely, yeesh. And I know the Twins won today without him, but they beat the Angels. They're going to be able to beat the Astros doing some of the things that some of the lineups they're rolling out, let's say. But on the bright side, Donnie Salami and Ed Julian and Alex Kirilloff came in today with a home run. Kyle Farmer had a 2-run double. Again, one last thing I'm going to leave a note on. We talked about the depth of the Twins, whether it was the pitching staff, whether it was the lineup in general. The Twins had depth, and Rocco was going to flex it, and the Twins did. And holy cow, they won the American League Central. I know it's a weak AL Central. I know people are going to say it doesn't count. I know they're going to say win a playoff game first before you get all excited, to which I say you have to win in the playoffs by first getting into the playoffs. And they did that. Check that off the list. It doesn't matter how many games they won. Remember, the Atlanta Braves won the World Series 2 years ago with 85 wins, and they did not have Ronald Acuna on the roster at all. So, Eddie Rosario was an NLCS hero. He came out of nowhere. So the point is to say, just get into the playoffs and see what happens. And one final thing I'm going to leave you on is the Twins had a great run of dominance. Rocco Baldelli, by the way, he's won a AL Central in 2019, 2020, now 2023. That's second most in team history. Gardy has ones in 02, 03, and 05, and also, 02, 03, 04, excuse me, and then 06, 09, and 10. So he's got 6. And there's some catching up to do for Rocco. But look, man, Rocco's got his flaws, and I've talked about him on the podcast at length, but He's gotten the Twins to 3 division championships. And Falvey, in his time here, in his, again, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, in his 7 years running the Twins in 2017 and 2019, 2020, and now 2023, in 4 of those 7 years, which is more than half, the Twins have gotten into the playoffs. And I know things aren't perfect, and I've criticized the regime on this podcast before, so I'm not shilling for them, but we're here. And we got to just acknowledge that they got them to this point, and it's going to be fun. The Twins have to get into the playoffs. They have to first punch their ticket. They did that if they want to try and break that playoff curse. There's no data, there's no evidence to suggest that their lack of wins is going to prohibit them, especially when a 101 loss team couldn't do it. When some of those great teams with Mauer, Morneau, Santana, whoever, Jim Thome weren't able to do it. It just doesn't matter. It's going to randomly happen. And who knows? It could be this fluky group of weirdos that end up winning it and getting that first playoff win. But even still, I will take the ride of the early 2000s Twins all the way from 2002 to 2010, that whole span in between, and even all of the playoff losses in between, all of the heartbreak. I will buy the ticket and ride the ride again. I know Kansas City won a World Series, but they only had 2 years of relevance. And they're back in the dumpster fire. And they were in the dumpster fire long before then. They got a 2-year pop-up, and now they're back to the dumpster fire. I get a World Series is what we all want to win. And I want the Twins to win a World Series too. And I'm not going to say that 10 times out of 10, I would choose not winning a World Series and sustained regular season success over 2 years of playoff success and 2 decades of not even mediocrity, but poor baseball being played. But I'd buy the ticket and ride the ride again. Actually, you know what? I lied. 10 times out of 10, I'm buying the ticket and I'm riding the ride for what the Twins have had compared to what the Royals have had over the last 20 years. The Twins have had success. It's been fun. And I wouldn't be as devoted of a Twins fan as I was. I wouldn't have had that childhood admiration for the Twins had those early 2000s Twins not been so successful. Would I, if I grew up a Royals fan in Missouri in 2006, I was really excited for a 90 loss team after 90 loss team after 90 loss teams. You know what got me to be a card carrying, whatever packing member of the Twins fan club was the 2006 Twins and the fun that was, and the years following that with 09 and 10 and all that. That long sustained success kept me invested in them. And you're not necessarily going to get that the other way around with Kansas City. You'll get a lot of bandwagons. You'll get a lot of support, but it's just not quite the same. So buy the ticket, ride the ride. It's probably going to end in heartbreak, but my expectations for the Twins in the postseason is simple. They have one goal in the postseason. That's all it is. I do not expect them to win the World Series, but my goal is for them, win a playoff game, heck, even win a series, and you can do whatever in the ALDS. But just win a playoff game, win a playoff series, and break the curse so this dang franchise can just move on, and so we can stop getting clowned on social media for being Twins fans for having to deal with the 18-game losing streak. So let's get that done. Let's get it out of the way. That's the only goal. If you do that, you're playing with house money the rest of the postseason. All right, guys, this has been awesome. Thanks for joining in with me during this live stream. Again, if you listened later on in the podcast, hey, thanks for doing that as well on the post-recording editions. Give us a follow, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, @BombsAway, and doing all that fun stuff as well. Also follow us on YouTube, too. For Bombs Away, I'm CJ Baumgartner. The Minnesota Twins are 2023 American League Central champions, and let's bask in the fun. We'll see you guys next week.